Di ma bumi dipijak, di sinan langit dijunjung, di ma semua digali, di sinan ayah disawak, di ma rantau diuni, di sinan adai dipakai.
Masjid Lama Setapak started its construction in 1881 at Kampung Puah. The masjid was originally built from wood with a pyramidal roof together with nailless construction. Its brick and stone architecture has influences of British colonial architecture. Masjid Lama Setapak was one of the oldest masjid in the history of Kuala Lumpur. The masjid was in use until 2005. Unfortunately, the masjid is not in use anymore. Selangor, one of the 14 states of Malaysia, is geographically located on the west coast of Peninsula Malaysia. The name of Selangor is derived from the Selangor River estuary that was important for the growth of early settlements around Kuala Selangor back then. The history of Selangor can be traced back to the 1600s. The significance of that era was the large-scale tin mining due to the abundance of tin deposits. The demographic of people that resided in Selangor during the era were the Bugis, or otherwise known as Raja Lumu. Kuala Lumpur is Malaysia's capital city located in the center of Selangor state. It was once a part of Selangor until it was separated from Selangor in 1896 and later became the capital of Malaysia under the federal government. Kuala Lumpur was centralized at the confluence of Sungai Klang and Sungai Gombak by settlers and Mandalings or miners from Sumatra with their family members and hired workers in the 1800s. Settlements were created, trade centers were established, and basic administration was introduced by one of their leaders named Sultan Maposo, who had been given the title as state heir by the Sultan of Selangor Bugis to serve the rural communities in the areas of both rivers. The original name of Setapak was Batu Anak Tapak and was led by Tok Batin, chief of natives there. The community was trying to change the name to Gonggang but did not get support from the crowd since they already get used with Setapak. Then the name officially changed to Setapak. It covered the area of Kampung Bandar to Gunung Bunga Buah, which is Taman Melawati now, to Bukit Dinding, which is Setiawangsa, straight to Polapol until Pahang roundabout, known to be Kampung Siam. Kampung Puah is one of the oldest villages in Kuala Lumpur and comprises of many other villages such as Kampung Lembah, Kampung Seberang, and Kampung Bahagia. The old community used to make a living by fishing at the Sungai Gombak River for selling and also serving as food on a daily basis. In the 1950s, Sungai Gombak started to be polluted as an effect of industrial waste and mining works. In the early 1940s, animals such as mouse deer, deers, monkeys, and apes usually roam around the villagers' houses. Today, there are no more jalawa and lampang fish, in which only tilapia fish can be found in the river. Masjid Lama Setapak is one of the oldest masjids in Kuala Lumpur. It was originally built using timber with a pyramid-shaped roof in the year 1879 or earlier. In 1900, the masjid was relocated to Lot 2772 behind the main market of Setapak. Later, it was relocated again to the current site in 1920 while still preserving its initial building structure. During the conservation process that has been carried out in the masjid's compound since 2006, Lots of old artifacts were found, including a wooden beetle for bedok and tombstone which was believed to be hundreds of years old. The pieces were positively believed to have originated from the Dutch because the pattern and motifs of the porcelain are similar to the Dutch style, as it has been verified by the experts. Based on history, Gombak and Kuala Lumpur were inhabited by Aborigines of Senoi, Semang and Jakun ethnicity, and Malays were driven to live in Klang. Kampung Puah is the second oldest Malay village in Klang Valley, and it is located in Setapak, one of the Gombak districts during the time. It got its own name based on one of the Minangkabau tribes, which is Puah tribe, that came from West Sumatra and built their village in Setapak. Klang War 1867 occurred from a dispute between Malay chiefs, which also included Chinese secret societies for the control of tin-rich districts in Selangor. The dispute lasted for 7 years between the Malay chiefs that polarized them into two parts, which are the lower river and the upper river chiefs. Among them were Raja Mahdi, who was a dispossessed son of the previous ruler in Klang. He held the town of Klang for 2 years to the approval of the upper river chiefs. Raja Mahmud, son of the Panglima Raja of Selangor, Raja Hitam of Bernam, groups of the Sumatran settlers led by Muhammad Aqib and his younger brother Muhammad Tahir. Raja Abdullah's followers included Raja Ismail, who continued the war after Raja Abdullah's death. He and Tengku Kudin also received support from the Sultan of Selangor, and Malays switched sides during the war. Datuk Dagang Muhammad Tahir, who helped Raja Mahdi capture Klang from Raja Abdullah, eventually switched to Tengku Kudin's side. There are many factors that contributed to the mass migration of Malays of Sumatra, Java, and Sulawesi to the Malay Peninsula. Among the reasons include the 18th century's increase and need for gold and tin mining in Selangor, which had attracted many of the people from the Indonesian archipelago to migrate and start a new life in the peninsula. After the Minangkabau people from the West Sumatra came and built their village in Kampung Puah Setapak, all West Sumatran migrants of various ethnicities that came into Setapak and Gombak were grouped together and were documented as part of the Malay race by the British colonies for the purpose of administrative ease during their colonization. The West Sumatran migrants that consisted of Kajal, Batubara, Tembusai and Orang Kuantan ethnicities lived in Setapak and were separated into villages based on the ethnic groups. The Masjid construction process began before 1881 and ended within a year's time. The Masjid was constructed at Kampung Puah, which is Kampung Puah Kubunau, by the villagers led by Datuk Sati, who was the penghulu that controlled the Gombak and Setapak district. The Masjid was built with the capacity of fitting 50 people. The materials that were used for the Masjid at that time were timber columns, bamboo walls, and rambia roof that is influenced by the Nusantara architecture. The Masjid was originally built with a wooden pyramidal roof together with nailless construction to ease the moving of the Masjid from one place to another. The Masjid had only 6 stairs at a time. The design of the Masjid is like the current design but in a smaller size.
Perbezaan masjid tersebut diketuai oleh seorang penghulu bernama Penghulu Datuk Sati. Jadi dengan menggunakan bahan-bahan pokok-pokok yang ada di sekitar Setapak, mereka telah menebang dan mendirikan masjid itu dengan reka bentuk apa yang kita lihat Masjid Lama itulah. Itulah reka bentuk dia.
The masjid was first relocated at a site near Sekolah Kebangsaan Setapak, which is Lot 2772. The materials that were used after the relocation process are different from the first one, with timber for wall and floor and zinc for the roof. SK Setapak, was constructed after the relocation of the masjid, and it was the first Malay school of Kuala Lumpur. The masjid was relocated for the second time at Lot 346 and 347 due to the tin mining issues at the former site, which is Lot 2772. The materials that were used are different this time as well, with timber for the whole building, but it was decided to keep the original shape and the style of the roof known as Bumbung Meru. Due to the World War II, the masjid did not receive enough attention from the British colonists, causing the construction works to be stalled and the process of replacing the masjid's materials to be deemed incomplete. The construction and the structure of the masjid was changed to brick and concrete since it is stronger and sturdier compared to timber. Meanwhile, the roof remains with its original form and materials. The Malay community protesting against the Malayan Union held a meeting in the Setapak Mosque. Datuk Empat Muhammad Said's residence, who led the meeting, is located opposite to the masjid. In the year 1948, the Malayan Union was dissolved. The community, led by a new penghulu, were determined to refurbish the masjid. They, however, did not receive enough funds to fully refurbish the masjid, so they only fixed issues that were in critical condition. A renovation process was held to enlarge the masjid due to the increasing capacity of Jemaah every year. The renovation was approved by Datuk Harun Idris and Datuk Kamaruddin Idris that they had contacted to generate the funds needed for the renovation. The cost to renovate the masjid and prayer area is mostly sponsored by the Selangor state government and also from the public. The masjid was officially opened by Datuk Haji Harun Idris, which is Menteri Besar Selangor at that time, and changed its name to Masjid Jamil Ihsan in December 1971. A renovation to enlarge the masjid was held in the same year to increase the capacity of the Jemaah. In the year 1977, an earthquake caused by a volcanic eruption in Sumatra caused the masjid's floor to be misaligned and cracks occurred in the walls and also the floors. At the same time, the area was experiencing heavy rains that led to flooding. The masjid authorities asked the higher authorities to solve the flooding issues, which then causing them to create drains in Sungai Gombak. The drain did not solve any of the flooding issues, and the masjid had to change its carpet 6 times a year. Sri Paduka Baginda Tuanku Jaafar visited the masjid, and the masjid authorities reported and highlighted the unsolved issues of the masjid. But the problem ended unsolved because it was decided that the masjid should be moved, and this encouraged people to apply for the construction of a new masjid. However, the first application for construction was a failure. Masjid Jamil Ihsan, which is the old masjid, was used until September 2005. A new masjid was built in 2003 and completed in 2005 and is still in use until today. The new Masjid Jamil Ihsan sits beside the old one. The new masjid was built with the concept of Middle Eastern and modern design, where there is a minaret built outside the masjid building and a large dome that stands beautifully at the top of the building. The concept is clearly visible on the dome and the roof of the masjid. In the year 2006, conservation works were done on the old masjid by the Department of National Heritage, also known as Jabatan Warisan. However, the lack of data from old documents made tracing of history and chronological development of the masjid quite challenging. Consequently, the information of Masjid Jamil Ihsan was unearthed and obtained through interviews conducted with the local community and previous members of the masjid organization. Other than that, further research had been done by visiting agencies that may have information on the masjid under study. Masjid Jamiul Ihsan Setapak, the oldest masjid, was officially registered under Kementerian Warisan and Kebudayaan, as the masjid is a witness to the changes that have taken place and is a sign of different cultures in the region. The spatial arrangement process impacted the layout of Masjid Jamiul Ihsan over time. The masjid's spaces were examined and classified based on their functional zoning. It is explored in terms of proportion, size, balance, and symmetry in connection to architectural concepts. The main prayer hall, mihrab, and foyer were the interior facilities of the masjid in 1933. The growing number of jama'ah was a driving factor in the restoration of the masjid in 1971, which featured new facilities such as a female prayer hall, spillover, imam's chamber, restrooms, storage areas, and ablution area built into the main building structure. Nonetheless, the addition was removed in order to maintain its uniqueness for conservation purposes. The existing masjid size division includes the construction compound. Between 1933 and 2021, the spatial organization was split into two groups based on spatial function and accessibility. Since the underground construction of Masjid Lama Setapak could not be examined, therefore, the foundation system of the masjid is determined based on the research and studies regarding the soil condition as well as the current building condition of the masjid. Strip footing is seen as the best foundation system suited to be used by Masjid Lama Setapak. It can be made of rocks, blocks of concrete, sand cement, or stabilized earth. As Masjid Jamiul Ihsan is influenced by colonial architecture, the classical type of column, which is Tuscan order, can be seen as one of the structural members of the masjid. All the columns were built with square column pedestals that are designed to carry loads from the columns to the underground footing. The original masjid was constructed using timber columns before it underwent a full renovation of its materials into brick in 1933. The building had undergone changes in regards to its floor materials from timber floor as it was originally constructed. The current flooring of Masjid Jamiul Ihsan is concrete flooring with another layer of screed laid over the concrete as finishes, which is fully used in the interior part of the masjid. Masjid Jamiul Ihsan has the whole flooring level of interior space that consists of main prayer hall, mihrab, and foyer approximately 700 mm higher than the ground level. The earliest wall system of Masjid Jamiul Ihsan evolved from bamboo wall in the 1880s to timber wall in 1911 when it was relocated for the first time. The current wall of the masjid is a non-load bearing wall, which is filled with arches, doors, and windows. The masjid used brick masonry with the thickness of 260 mm, including plaster and paint finishes on both interior and exterior sides. Masjid Jamiul Ihsan portrays its uniqueness of design through the pyramidal roof structure that was influenced by Nusantara architecture. The roof style, also called Bumbung Meru, is a two-tiered pyramidal roof that helps in terms of thermal insulation and ventilation through the gap in between the two roofs. Along the perimeter of the roof, a series of decorative crenellations were identified that features the influence of Mughal style that was brought by the British. As for the upper layer, fascia boards were built along the roof eaves with a complex design. The material of the roof finishes was once changed into zinc roof in 1911, replacing the original Ramba roof. It is believed that the roof was replaced again using asbestos sheets before it was changed into terracotta tiles due to the conservation works done to the masjid. There are two types of doors used in Masjid Jamiul Ihsan, which are categorized into the main door and secondary door. When the masjid was first built, the wall was filled with open arches with no secondary doors and thus created an open layout. The secondary doors were added after the renovation process took place. The main door is made up of timber sliding door of 2 panels and is using result frame with blue paint coating, while the secondary doors were built to fill in the arches. They are timber panel doors which using result frame with blue paint coating as framing. Masjid Jamiul Ihsan has 2 types of windows installed with the intention to aid in terms of ventilation, views, and lighting while maintaining security of the masjid. Different sizes of windows were chosen to fit a certain space with a certain function of the masjid. The main window is a rectangular glass window in result frame with blue paint coating. The main window is located above the main door, while the secondary windows are stained glass fixed panes in result frame with blue paint coating located above the secondary doors. Masjid Jamiul Ihsan has arches installed on the circumference of the masjid and the main prayer hall as well. Nonetheless, the arches were not in common style of vernacular architecture and were believed to belong to Mughal architecture, where this architectural style was brought by the British and has been adapted to reflect the Islamic characteristics in Tanah Melayu. Each of the features in Masjid Jamiul Ihsan varies in terms of the motifs and materials used. They portray their own specialties and uniqueness in regards to the historical background and the design process to appear as captivating elements. Those features include wall decorations, crenellations, mimbar, stained glass, and the cupolas.
Yang masih ada di setapak ni. Itulah sebabnya saya menumpukan perhatian sangat pada masjid ni kerana ada kaitan dengan orang-orang Melayu yang ada di sini ni. Sekarang ni orang-orang Melayu kita dah banyak yang keluar dari setapak. Jadi kami anggap masjid itu sebagai simbol. Inilah orang-orang Melayu yang pernah tinggal di setapak dan sekarang tak tinggal di setapak.